more you harness your spiritual nature and live in accord with your authentic self, the more you will embody your enlightened essence. You will be lifted out of the egoic mindsets and transcend limiting beliefs. In 1995, I was in New Zealand. I lived in New Zealand at the time, and a friend had suggested a film that we go and see. And so I walked in, and I love films, so I walked into the cinema and watched this film. And during the film, something really hit me. Something really hit me from the message in the film. And I came out of that film absolutely with my life feeling upside down. And I didn't know what had happened. I had no idea, because up until then I had no contact with my spirit. I had no contact with religion or anything like that. But something really touched me deeply and opened me up. And at the time, it took me a while to understand what had gone on. So what I did, I went to the same film for the next 2 weeks, almost every night. And I just kept going, because it was like, there's a message in there for me. Something's happened to me, because it really shifted me. It really kind of like, it took the ground away from me. And I thought, I don't know what's happening. I thought I understood my life, but clearly I didn't. And what I realized on the very last showing of that film, I came out of the cinema and I understood there was a different perspective, a different picture, a different understanding to life than the one I knew. My heart brought me to Peru, because after the awakening experience in 1995, that created a huge shift in me. And I then started following a spiritual path. But I got a bit lost in that too. It was great at the start, but then years of just following, understanding my mind and working better with my mind and making better choices, I knew there was something missing. And what I realized was I was frightened. I was frightened to make the next step. And so I deferred making this next step for years, and then got even more lost in myself. Because although my life looked really great and I was going along, as if everything was okay inside, I knew I was not happy. Out of that, 2 years later, it was like, you have to go to Peru. This is what my heart was saying. You have to go to Machu Picchu. I didn't know why, but I just felt this calling. And then I found this pilgrimage. This centre had been sending me brochures for years and I hadn't done anything about it. But then it sent me another brochure, and here was a pilgrimage to Peru, and I thought, this is it. Then it was going to Machu Picchu. I have to do this. And even though a part of me was a bit scared, I signed up for it. And I did it, and that's how I got to Peru, and that's how I got to Machu Picchu. We had to do this 3-night, 4-day trek in the Inca Trail, but not the main Inca Trail that people usually do. But it was very high altitude, and we'd been in Cusco for a few days to kind of acclimatise to the altitude. But on the second day of the trek, I started to feel unwell, and there was a couple of other people in the group too. We were kind of falling behind a little bit and just not feeling good. And when I got into the camp that night, I was just exhausted. I was really exhausted. And I hadn't put 2 and 2 together at that stage that it was the altitude and my reaction to the altitude that was actually causing that. Anyway, next day I was really struggling. We were climbing up and down these hills, and normally it's no problem to me. It wouldn't be a problem. I'm used to hill walking and everything. But for some reason, I was just like really struggling. And by the end of the day, I was like the last person actually into the camp that night. And I just collapsed. And then the next day we went to Machu Picchu. And I remember most of what happened in Machu Picchu, but just my last memory was actually stepping onto the bus at the end of our day in Machu Picchu. And it was only afterwards that people told me what had happened. So we had another day of relaxation in the hotel. And then the following day we were supposed to go into a ceremony. But I got really ill at the start of that. And the organisers took me to another room. And seemingly, and I have no memory of this, I spent the whole night just turning in circles on the bed as people just watched over me and made sure I wasn't going to fall out the bed. And the shaman came the next morning and he was surprised that I was actually unconscious. At some point in the night I'd gone unconscious. And so he said, get her to a hospital. So that was when I was taken to a hospital and into the intensive care there. And then it was 4 days later that I actually woke up from the coma. In the coma, my spirit got fully awakened, because in the coma what happened is my spirit left my body and went out into the infinite and merged with the infinite. So it was like I was dead on the earth, but my spirit was fully alive in the spirit world. And then after coming out of the coma, waking up in the hospital, I was still in that spirit. So it was like everything had changed again at another level, a huge level. Can people be on this earth in the enlightened state? Yes. And so, in a sense, that's what I'm working towards. But I don't think of it as, I've got to get there. It's not a goal. It's like, I don't have that goal, that drive from the condition to achieve something, right? I don't have that anymore because that's of the conditioned world. So it's just, I know I'm walking my path. I know I'm doing everything I can to walk this path, to fully awaken, to fully embody my spirit. And that's enough. I'm doing enough. What we would say is it's a school of personal and spiritual development. It really focuses on both those aspects. And there are a number of teachings that incorporate the school, and the school works with and shares and offers courses and teachings on that appeal to a lot of people. So we have teachings on the Path of Isis, which is based on ancient Egyptian spirituality. We have teachings on shamanism, which is very prevalent in our world now, and a lot of people are very interested in shamanism too, which comes from the indigenous cultures. And then we have teachings also on what's called the rays of divine consciousness, which is a teaching that comes purely from spirit, from Archangel Gabriel. We do meditation, we do a 2-year training called the Priestess of the Moon, which again is guided by the enlightened spirit. So we have these different avenues where people can engage with us, but at the basis it's all about personal and spiritual development to help people come into contact with their spirit, into contact with their wise, authentic self, but also give people an access to teachings and trainings where they can earn a living too, you might say, or that they can fulfill something within themselves, which is their spiritual development. The very first morning, we got on a bus to go to one of the sacred sites in Peru. And Fotoula and I happened to sit beside each other on the bus, and we started talking. We realised that we both lived in Glasgow. Fotoula lived in the West End, I lived in the East End. And we just really connected. It was like instant. We just chatted the whole way. And then interestingly, we never spoke again until the day we spent in Machu Picchu. And then there was a group of us who went around Machu Picchu together, and Fotoula and I were in that group. And my last memory of Peru and that trip actually was getting onto the bus in Machu Picchu at the end of the day. And I think we got onto either the very last bus or one of the last buses. And I remember stepping onto that bus, and I remember Fotoula was behind me. And I don't remember another thing after that for the rest of the trip. So we actually met in Peru. And then what happened was, because I was in this spirited, enlightened state, it was amazing when I came back to Scotland, because I was still in this state. But also as the days passed, what I could feel was I was starting to fragment, because it was like I knew something energetically wasn't right with me. And sometimes I would burst out laughing, and sometimes I would burst out crying. And what I realised was I wasn't really integrated in this world. And I knew I needed some help energetically to integrate.
I had this deep calling to phone Fi and find how she was. And my helping spirit, which in shamanism we have helping spirits, deities and beings of light who come and speak to us and give us instructions on what to do when it comes to healing. So my helping spirit, which is the goddess Isis from Egypt, she said to me, you have to phone Fi, she needs help. So that was a few weeks after we came back to Glasgow. And I phoned Fi and I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm not doing great. And what do you think I need? And I said, I think you need a lot of healing to bring yourself back from that expansive state of the near-death experience to this everyday world, to really ground yourself in your body. And she said that she couldn't find anybody to help her, because the therapist that she was working with, said this was beyond her abilities. She had never seen anything like that before. And she said, will you help me? And I said, yes, I will, because that was my guidance. Fi and I founded together the Isis School of Holistic Health, and we both have this deep, deep calling. For me, it comes through many lifetimes that I've discovered over the years. I had a huge awakening experience in 2006 and 2007, and I never looked back. And when Fi and I met together, we just knew this was something we both had to do. And we love our work because it's so guided, it's so sacred, and really fills our heart.
This higher awareness is my reality, generated through the near-death experience in Peru and the years of focused spiritual work and personal development. I know with every cell of my being that the higher states of consciousness are accessible and incredibly beautiful. I know this too can be your reality.